Hey folks, how's it going? Matthew Ventures here with another update for Breach Buddies. Very excited to be sending you this update on AI. I've been working on the bots for this game, the bots that are going to play as if they were other players, other raiders, and I'm really excited to show you what I've got so far. I've been running this with some of my playtesters, and they've proved to be some pretty serious adversaries, even just with the base gear. And I'm really excited about that because if they can compete against players, then, that's basically a dream come true. So here I am in the game here. I'm jumping into this. By the way, in case you're new to the series, this is a game called Breach Buddies, which I've been making in my free time. I'm a game dev and also an indie. Okay, cool. So basically, I'm spawning in here. I put one bot on my team. So he's going to go do some great stuff. And then I'm playing as another character. Oh, and then there's the bot. They found me already. Yeah, I was able to get that one pretty quickly. And then here's the other guy. Looks like he shot my partner down, but I was able to finish him before the game ended. So that's just a little bit of a preview of what it's like to fight the bots. I think I actually had invincibility on during that case, so we'll just pretend like that was all skill. But I'd like to actually zoom out now and just show how the bots are thinking. So if I just zoom out here and I push this button, or was it this button? Yeah, so now we'll see the FOV for all of the bots. It's basically those two guys on the right. And you can see them walking around the space and sort of see how they think. The bots have no cheats, so they don't automatically know where other players are going to be. Basically, they're just constantly looking within their view frustrum to determine whether or not they see an enemy. If they do see an enemy, they aim at them, and then they shoot them. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the logic there, and we will break it down. Actually, here, let's jump into that now. So if I just pop open some of the AI logic, I'm using this awesome asset from Opsiv called Behavior Trees for Everyone. I highly recommend it. I actually just did a video on another asset from Opsiv called the Ultimate Character Controller, which was not very good. But this asset is like best in class. It's incredible, and it saved me, I think, so much time. It's a great. If you're not familiar with behavior trees, by the way, it's a great way to visualize how AI works. And if you are familiar with behavior trees, I would really appreciate your feedback on how I could make this behavior tree a little bit better, because it is actually the first one I've ever made in my career. So here's how it works. Basically, we have the entry node, and then we run a sequence. Sequence is basically, it does things in a row as soon as one of them fails, and then it exits. And so what it's going to do here is it basically has a little bit of a wait time to just represent that, just like a normal player doesn't immediately start playing. It just gives them a little tick to like get ready. Then it has some initialization logic, and then it runs a repeater, which means it does this thing over and over again forever. And so what that sequence is basically they first have some death handling and some debug handling. Then this is where we get to something interesting. We have a selector, which let me see. So basically, a selector is similar to an OR operation. It will return success as soon as one of them succeeds. So a sequence basically does everything until one of them fails. A selector does everything under it until one of them succeeds. So in this case, there's two children nodes here. One is to check if we have a target, and one of them has no target. So in this case, if this succeeds, it doesn't run the other one. So that's kind of how that works. So if we go into the check has target section, it's basically determining if we have combat enabled, and if we do, then we're going to look for a target, and that's going to say, I don't know what it's doing here. It's basically confirming that we have a target. If we do have a target, then we're updating the navigation, and then if we have a target and we updated the navigation, we go into here in the sequence, we check if the enemy is in our FOV, and then we try to turn towards them to the degree that we can, and then we shoot at them. And then it looks like it's clearing the target if we're not in the FOV. So like, again, this is more than I probably want to go into detail, but if we fail the first node here, basically we check if they're in the FOV and they're not in the FOV, then we'll go over to this section, which will basically clear the target, because now we don't know where they could be. They're not in our FOV anymore. We don't have any information on that. We're going to keep searching until we find them in our FOV, which would probably happen in this section, where basically we have no current target, so we are going to run one of these two sequences. The first one is basically asking if we should update our destination, and if we should update our destination, we choose a random destination. And then the other one is if we should not update our destination, we're just going to, I think, continue moving wherever we're trying to go. So that's sort of a basic depiction of kind of how this all works. And it's actually really interesting to kind of watch the lights go green as it starts to think through these different branches. But that's kind of a very brief look into behavior trees and how that works. I'll show you a little bit of how I designed the map here, because there was a few sort of catches that I had to do. The first was I significantly overhauled the hazard system, which is what these little fires are doing right now. So as you can see, there's fire on the map, and that's supposed to represent one of... Oh dear, the game just reset. Looks like they probably both died or something. Let me just go in solo so I could show you some stuff. Oh, and we got some errors too, huh? Alright, we'll have to figure that out. But basically, if I jump in here, you'll see that there's a bunch of fires on the map, and I'm going to have hazards of a variety of sorts in the future. The fire's just kind of there as a placeholder. But these fires could basically spawn anywhere in the map, or really any hazard can spawn anywhere. Maybe somebody throws a grenade or something, and it creates some sort of fire or something like that. And what was important was that I don't want the AI to seem really dumb, and they did seem really dumb when I had these fires, because they were constantly, like, setting their destination to be in the fire, and then they would walk into the fire and just stand there until they were, like, totally cooked, and then they died. And it didn't make any sense. Like, no one would ever do that. And the other thing they would do often was path right through the fires. So if they could clearly walk around the fire, they should. And the way that I fixed that was I actually set up a new layer to my navigation system. As you'll see here, there's a nav mesh with blue floor, but some of the floor is purple. And what that purple represents is the hazard section. And the way that this fire works is I have a hazard volume, and it's basically... It's got a nav mesh modifier volume, which is setting the area type to hazard. And so that small distinction is actually something I can do at runtime when I'm dynamically baking the nav mesh. And that allows them to basically determine that, okay, this is very expensive terrain to walk through, so I shouldn't try to walk through it. And then as far as preventing them from pathing to it, I have a little sphere collider here, and I will check whether or not they're within the... whether or not their desired destination is within a hazard volume sphere before approving that destination. So if it turns out, oh, they're trying to go somewhere and it's inside the fire, I say, no, buddy, you're not going there. Choose a new location. And that's pretty much it. So this is represented maybe like 80 hours. Let's see where we're at right now. I think we are... So it may have been the last video or the one prior where I said, you know, we were celebrating like 600 hours on the project. Right now, we are at just around 725, with the vast majority of that still having gone into Photon, which is basically a networking code. Over the last month, I've put in about 100 hours. Maybe 30 of those hours has been on the behavior tree, and I did a lot of work to reset the Perforce repository, which was not very glamorous, but it took some time to figure that out. It's funny because I always go to the same tutorial on YouTube, basically, to set up my Perforce repository on AWS, and I had like the top comment there for years, because I had explained like one of the problems the guy made in the video, and like everybody else ran into that problem also. But in the process of trying to edit that comment, I actually deleted it. So just for the sake of helping people out, I posted it again. But I definitely watch more YouTube videos than I make YouTube videos. That's probably true for most content creators, but I think Yeah, that's something interesting to think about, right? It's like creators probably consume a lot more than they create when it comes down to it. I was just thinking about that recently. I don't really know where that train of thought's going, but the last 7 days I've been pretty much solely focused on UI and design. I was working on this over the weekend, and the reason why is because I'm actually really happy with where the bots are right now, and I've been working on something new recently, which is called the Hideout. Now I'm calling it the Hideout because that's what they call it in Escape from Tarkov, but it's just basically your home base where you're going to manage your squad and all of your resources. So, Breach Buddies, working title here. So, this is where your buddies would be. But right now, I'm kind of just calling that the crew. And here's what that looks like. So, I downloaded all these 3D assets from, I think it was a Cinti Studios asset pack. And then I have most of these graphics are from this sci-fi pack that I also got from the asset store. And this is sort of just a little ambient scene of like your uh, some trading depot where you can see these little imps going around in these I forget what they're called, like forklifts. So that's supposed to look a little bit silly. And then I have these other demons that are just randomly spawning in through these sort of like hell gates. Um, and that's sort of like the ambient scene in the background. It's just for fun for right now, but eventually you'll be able to see in this scene like all of the different people on your crew, and they'll be doing stuff, and hopefully, if you want to upgrade things, that will mean buying assets that you'll see. I did something like this in NSA Intern, and there's other games that do it even better, like maybe PewDiePie Tuber Simulator, where like as you accrue resources and Escape from Tarkov does this as well. Like you'll slowly get more and more cool stuff on the main menu. What I dislike about Escape from Tarkov though is that the hideout is kind of like not the main menu. Many people just don't even go into it at all. And so I want the hideout to be sort of like the focal point. And there's going to be a lot more narrative here, so I'm trying to find, ways that this is going to be engaging, cuz right now it's basically just like a backdrop and all the important stuff is actually the UI elements. But at some point I'd want you to like look into the scene and see something interesting and interact with it, and like something meaningful will happen. Like Fallout Shelter, you're directly interfacing the the base, with the hideout itself. So those are just some thoughts. Again, like sometimes I get an idea for something and I know I'm like 100 hours away from even getting to that like part of the project, but it's worthwhile just explaining it and trying to think through some of these things, because that's kind of what keeps me motivated at the end of the day. Is just like imagining you know what awesome stuff I could do. So there's just a bunch of like temporary buttons here with whatever the default stuff is that they gave. This is what I've been working on recently, though. It's the crew. So if you click on crew, you can add members of the crew, and this will just randomly generate a bunch of people. So in this case, there's like a 99 character and a 31 character, and presumably you have to pay to recruit these people into your crew. But ideally, the way that you're going to be recruiting people is by going into raids and abducting them and pulling them out through demonic sacrifices. But this is just another way to do that, and essentially this is going to be the crew management screen. But that is still very much a work in progress, and this is sort of just a sneak peek to show you where we're headed and where my most recent work has gone with respect to UI. So I think the very next step, if you want to know what I'm going to be doing, like this weekend, is I'm going to be creating some sort of save data system so that I could save what crew members you currently have active, and then what crew members you have in your entire roster. And then at some point, each of those crew members is going to have their own inventory. And so that's something that I think is going to be a little bit complicated, because I'm going to have to, like in Escape from Tarkov, you manage your storage, and then your player has an inventory. But in this game, since you have a crew, which I am going to limit to 4 people at a time, then you have your storage, but then you also have the active inventories of like 4 different characters. So that might get a little bit complex, and I have to think about how I'm going to visualize that. But It's a future me problem as far as I'm concerned today. Another idea here I had was, part of this game is like there's going to be a reckoning every, like, I don't know, maybe 60 days, and that's basically going to be the season of the game, at which point most things will reset. Though there'll be certain like blood sacrifices you could do to get certain things to carry over. Like maybe you have like a really cool, one of your champions is like really cool and you want to like do some sort of blood sacrifice on him, then you won't be able to play with him anymore this season, but next season you'll be able to play with him or something like that. Uh, but I think it'd be cool to have like a big ticker here, like to count down to the reckoning and see how that affects things. I think I'm really inspired by how much the Escape from Tarkov community has embraced this sort of like wipe um, gameplay. The way that kind of their meta works is every 6 months they completely reset every character's stats, and I don't like the idea of a complete reset, especially because this game is going to have microtransactions, and I don't want people to feel like they bought something and now it's getting like totally taken away from them. But um, I think there's probably a balance there that I think is going to be really compelling. So I'm excited about the potential there. So that's just me rambling for 16 minutes or so about this game I'm working on. I'm so passionate about this idea, and I'm really excited to be working on it. Work's probably going to slow down a bit just because for my day job, I am going to be working on sort of like a new team, which I think is going to present some onboarding challenges. Onboarding on a new team takes like a really long time, so this is going to be another situation where I think it's just going to take me some time to kind of get the ropes of things. Right now, I'm trying to finish up a project on my current team before I transition, and I've been putting in some extra hours on that, just trying to like do a really good job so I have a strong finish. Because I think to some degree, like people remember how you finish a lot more than how you started, especially in what state you leave things in. Because it's like someone's gonna come to your code and they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is how we left it," and you want to make sure that they smile when they think of how you left it. But my new job is actually going to be perhaps AI related, which is very exciting because that's kind of some of the stuff I've just been talking to you about that I've started to dip into for the first time in my career, really. So that'll be exciting to see, what principles I can apply from my independent study. I would say that most of my work on indie games, has often like been to inform how I can get a job, IRL. I think that's how it all started, right? When I was in college and I founded my first game company. It was basically at a time where I was still, you know, really, I mean, not to say like I'm not still trying to prove myself as a developer, but in that period, I think it was particularly at front of mind, like, oh, if I can make a good indie game, then people will want to hire me. And I think that's still true today. It's like, I'm constantly trying to work on my skills in my free time because, well, to be honest, like maybe you've experienced this in like university, but they say that like sometimes the work that you do for a class is way different than the kind of work you do in that profession. So for example, I in college I was like a terrible programmer. I hated programming class. Really didn't enjoy it with some very few exceptions. There were some really good instructors, but for the most part, like I just hated it, and I got super fed up with the system. And despite that, I would love working on my personal projects. So it's not like I didn't love programming. I loved coding. I loved creating things, but I just hated the institution, you know? And I'm fortunate that the work that I get to do as a day job is a lot more similar to my hobbyist projects. It's a lot more like the parts I love versus the parts I didn't enjoy very much at all. But there is a distinction between my day job work and my hobbyist work, and that's mainly that I'm not time constrained on my hobbyist work. With my day job, I often have to get something done for the sake of other people, right? I'm working on a team and they might get blocked, and so they need me to get it done quick so that they can move forward. Otherwise, I'm holding the team up. And just generally, I'm spending, my time is their money. So if I'm going too slow on something, then that's the detriment of their resources. So I constantly feel like I'm kind of in a, I would say I feel like I'm constantly in a time crunch. Though I'm sensitive of that word because obviously crunch means something very specific in my industry. But it just feels like there's constantly time pressure, I should say, to try to get this done. Whereas with my hobbyist projects, it's just for fun, right? So I can spend 20 hours building some bullshit plugin because I think it's gonna make me smile, and that's what I do, right? The reason why I built like all those graphs and stuff to show me the work investment I had done across different attributes of the project is partially because I think it's actually really important to know. But another reason is just like I think it's fun. I think it's interesting to look at those statistics and think, oh, okay, so this is where my time's been going, and this is where maybe I could, do this a bit differently. Um, that's kind of like the main distinction I would say between like my AAA work and my indie work. Is just in my indie work, I feel no time pressure. I feel like I could just chill out, and that's kind of what I love about it. It allows me to go deep on topics, whereas for my day job, I might just have to like find the fix and then get it in, you know. But that varies by where you work. I will say that when I was working in the live service environment back when I was working on Fortnite or Call of Duty, you constantly have to get the patch out, like every 2 months or something. Like that's the cycle. So you're moving pretty quick to get through these sprints, and there's some serious time pressure there, of which many articles have been written at this point. But on a yearly release or even biannual release, um, something like like Doom, which I guess comes out every 4 years or something like that. I think there's a lot more opportunity for experimentation, and there's also a greater expectation that like when somebody buys a game like that, they're expecting it to push the medium. They're expecting it to do stuff that hasn't been done before. Where I think people are a little bit more forgiving for a live service game to be, a bit more repetitive, I would say, at least with respect to its creative. So, though some teams aren't, Fortnite comes to mind. They like completely wiggle it up every time they come out with a new season, and that's why they're the best. Um, but there's a lot of teams that are doing interesting stuff, and I think that's something that probably not a lot of people consider enough when they're thinking about finding a job in the games industry. It's like, okay, you want to work in the games industry, but it's actually like really broad, broader than the film industry, certainly. Maybe not you know, like the film industry. If we're just talking about movies, then movies have a general like cycle and a general length, and it's fairly common for them to fall into like 3 month, 3 month, 3 month pre-pro, pro, and post-pro stages. But with video games, like you've got so much uh, variability with respect to the project timelines. There's no live service movie. Can you imagine a movie that's constantly playing and constantly getting updated as people watch it? That'd be fascinating. Maybe it's been tried. I'm not sure, but oh, I mean, I know there's those plays that would go. I think I learned about this in theater class. They'd have like these plays that like would go on for days, and you'd have like new actors pop up to like continue the story. Sometimes improvisational, but often, inspired by some I think Shakespearean scripts and stuff like that. Never been to one of those though. I feel like that's something I've been missing out on, particularly recently. Just like live theater, that's something I'd love to engage with. I watched some movies recently. I was really enjoying that. But I think the main thing that I need to do is play some more games that are tangent to Breach Buddies. I'd love to be playing a few more of these sort of raid-like games, such as I think there's a new game that came out called Frontier. There's another game called Hunt. Showdown or Shadow Down, something like that. DayZ comes to mind. That's a game I'd like to play. Maybe Project Zomboid. Um, yeah, there's quite a few games that kind of fall into that category of like these raid like shooters, I would say. Some people call them high stake shooters. I heard that recently. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what's on my mind. So if you've been listening to me blabber on just off the cuff, then thanks for hanging out. I'd love to hear what you think. Put it in the comments section. As always, I'm always really happy to chat with you folks. Um, the background's a little bit crazy. That's because I'm moving. I'm moving to a new apartment pretty soon, so I'm excited to set that up. I'm gonna be going with the vines from the ceiling, crazy office vibe that I've done before. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. You'll definitely notice it. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well also.